Kia ora koutou. This is Toby Manhire with a bonus episode of Gone By Lunchtime with today Madeleine Chapman, editor of the Spinoff. Heya, how are you? Thanks for jumping in.
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me. I can't remember the last time I've been on Gone By Lunchtime.
Really? More often we should get you in here. It's just thought we'd do this because Mad and I both went on Saturday evening to the New Zealand premiere of Prime Minister, which is a film about a former Prime Minister, intriguingly.
Shocking.
By the name of Jacinda Ardern. The film had world premiered at Sundance before coming to the New Zealand International Film Festival. There are other screenings around the country before it goes on general release. Mad also reviewed for the Spinoff this book, which is Jacinda Ardern's autobiography. She's particularly qualified to talk about both of those works because Mad literally wrote the book herself, or a book, on Jacinda Ardern.
The book.
The book. Jacinda Ardern, A New Kind of Leader, available in all bookstores. Probably.
I hope so,
Or certainly online if you've got access to the internet.
Scrape in some final royalties.
Yeah. So we thought it would be a good moment to kind of touch on those two texts, really, and what they tell us about that period. The place to start, maybe, Mad, is that at the Civic, the magnificent Civic, on Saturday night, flanking either side of the entrance were maybe 30 or 40 protesters, protesting, anti-vax protesters, effectively. And it was an interesting introduction, I suppose, to the evening, and a really clear reminder that some of the most compelling storyline within the film, within this book, within the Jacinda Ardern story more broadly, really is still going today for a lot of people.
Yeah, they were silent and kind of almost familiar at this point because the sign or the placards can be seen at kind of any Jacinda-related event, which obviously the film is not a COVID film or a vaccine film, but yeah, she really continues to have that kind of staying power, I guess, in terms of people really want to talk about what she did as Prime Minister and how it impacted people for better or worse. But I mean, I thought I was going to be late to the screening because I caught the bus like a good Aucklander, and then got there and it was lines out the door waiting to be let in because of security at the door, which is not a usual thing for a film screening in New Zealand. So, yeah, there was a little bit of an extra sense of like, oh, lots of people are here just to watch a movie, but this is not just a movie for some people still.
Yeah, and while I think it would be untrue to suggest that that presence is why Jacinda Ardern doesn't live in New Zealand, I also think it would be naive to imagine it's not part of the reason that Jacinda Ardern doesn't live in New Zealand at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. There is a moment, which is, I mean, nothing's a spoiler, it's based off real life events, but there is a moment that kind of suggests that in the film. I don't know if you remember what I'm talking about.
Is that when she's at the school? You mean that particular moment, which I remember quite vividly watching on various streams. I think it was at a school on the West Coast in the South Island where they basically, she's sort of surrounded and they almost sort of drive the Prime Minister's vehicle off the road.
Oh, well, yes, they show that, but then they kind of follow it up with her present day, kind of reflecting, again, never saying it out loud, but having quite a candid moment of missing home, and there's nothing like being at home, but also being very clear that she intends to not be in New Zealand for the foreseeable future.
Clark Gayford, who is a producer on on the film and whose footage forms a large part of it, and we'll come to that, was there. But, the truth is that for Jacinda Ardern, who has many other calls on her time, it's a bit of an undertaking to come to New Zealand. And I do think that's one of those areas that is a difficult one to get into in some ways, both the fact of Jacinda Ardern choosing for the time being to live overseas, who can blame her for a number of different reasons, but also her departing from office, which I think is one of those territories, and it gets into it a bit in the film, perhaps more in the film than it does in the book in some ways, because it's not written in the first person. I mean, she's obviously involved in the film in a certain way. I mean, they said on the night that she, they showed it to her after they'd already sent it to Sundance, but she, said that
that seems wild to me.
I mean, clearly Clark is involved in it. So, I think one thing to understand about the film, which is clear with an autobiography, is that it's not the film it's a film offering, and I think that's maybe something to talk about, is that when you make a film that you want, a feature film of whatever it is, 90-ish minutes, you can't do everything. You have to make some incredibly difficult choices about what you leave out mostly. And there's more stuff you leave out than you leave in. I think that you could probably make 7 or 8 different movies with all of the material they had.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting when they jumped back to 2017, and I was thinking, oh, okay, so they're going to try and get through the whole, I guess, senior political career. And then, the kind of series of national emergencies, essentially, that happened, I was almost surprised that they included the Whakaari White Island eruption.
Yeah.
Not because it's not a huge event, but just because there were so many that you go, well, for an international audience, which this is also for, is that going to be a thing that really registers compared to COVID pandemic and a terror attack, and those are all within, 12 months of each other.
Yeah.
So it did almost, when they were cutting to those things, and even some other moments that seemed more just personal preference probably on Jacinda and Clark's part, Antarctica, you do sort of go, oh.
There's a bit of Shackleton in there. Yeah, he's one of the main characters.
Of course, get Shackleton in. But you do, you go, oh yeah, you do just kind of have to pick very specific moments to include and just get rid of everything else, which by nature means pretty much anything actually political in terms of political process, domestic politics, any of that, and just get straight to the kind of headlines.
It must have been a hell of a tricky thing to put together, and I think that they would have lent on. I think they had one international editor as well as a New Zealand editor. Just to take one example that probably is illustrative. There's a moment when Jacinda Ardern is in her New England home being interviewed and talks about there being, during the COVID crisis, how she would sometimes look and horrified at her phone if one of a few people had texted her. And if that was, I sort of imagine that it's possible that the first time she told that story, she said, if I saw Ashley Bloomfield's name came up. I think I've heard her say that before. And of course, to a New Zealand audience, it's like, you know what that means. If you're talking to a global audience, it's like you then have to explain who Ashley Bloomfield doesn't appear in this film, incredibly. Maybe he does.
No, true.
Maybe he does in one Beehive press conference, but you've got to make those, and that's not. I'm not saying that particularly as a criticism. It's just a decision that you have to make about what's in and what's out. And the story that is told in this film is of drawing on extraordinary access, and that comes in 2 forms. One, Clark Gayford's footage, which he pops up like a jump scare guy
just
with a camera
in the face in your own home.
And the other one is the oral history project run by the Alexander Turnbull Library, Judith Fife and Co., which is the kind of contemporaneous discussions that Jacinda Ardern, along with a large number of New Zealand politicians, had throughout their career, in which has this powerful scenes of her listening back to herself in the moment, responding, which is sort of fascinating for the content and the response. But let's dwell for a moment on the Clark Gayford footage,
I'd love to.
It's really important. Tell me a bit about the cinematography there, Mad.
Well, he is credited as a cinematographer,
Wow.
and he basically, they kind of gave a bit of context either before or after the screening that essentially Clark, as somebody who has worked in television, has done documentary work, correctly assessed that his partner, who was about to become the leader of the Labour Party and go into this intense sort of fast turnaround election campaign, was a very interesting person and probably someone that people might in the future want to see more of in terms of the behind the scenes. So he started filming, which that makes sense to me. I get it. You know, you go, oh, this, I'm the only one seeing this. I should film this. I get that instinct. But then he managed to keep doing it for, 5, 6 years, all through these crises, through the coalition negotiations. You know, she's in the office making calls with, I presume, someone from New Zealand First about wanting to be their coalition partner, and he's right there, right up in there, filming at home, interviewing her when she gets home from work from like an extremely stressful day. Like this all just sounds like a nightmare to me. And on both sides, like I remember going on a holiday many years ago with 3 of my siblings and my parents, and I thought it would be funny because my parents don't travel well, that I would film it because there would surely be some funny interactions. So I was just filming on like a GoPro, and it was like stressful but kind of funny. I reckon I lasted 12 hours. We flew to Las Vegas before my sister basically threatened to like kill me if I kept filming her because she was pissed off. And then I never filmed again because I was like, you obviously don't want me to film you. You're very angry. Let's never do that ever again.
Clark Gayford would have kept going.
That's the end of my documentary. He is just like like there are shots in there where she obviously does not want to be filmed. And he's just committing to it. And I was like, I mentioned this to you before, like, that is real love. If your partner, if you are the Prime Minister of New Zealand, you are responding to a terror attack. You've had what you have yourself referred to as the longest week of your life, and then you go home, and then you're lying in bed reading briefing documents about gun laws, and then your partner, camera in the face, explain your week to me. Like, if you're staying with that person, like that, that's crazy.
It's kind of two things. One, if you've got any ambition to be a senior politician, find yourself a spouse who has documentary television both in their CV and their DNA. You know, that's important. But two, you need to habituate them, inure them to having your phone your phone up, and that they don't even notice once you get to the really heavy stuff that the phone's on.
But I think some of that footage was not even phone. I think that's a camera.
Oh, that's a camera.
Like that is a camera in the bedroom.
Right.
Trying to film an interview.
There's part of me I was thinking it's a bit like, there's part of it that's a bit like one of those Black Mirror episodes, you know, what if everything in your life was being filmed all the time? It's not like Black Mirror episode. It's not. It's actually a very tender and moving and
Sorry, Clark.
Film. Sorry, Clark. There is some parts of it that do make you go, jeepers. What it is incredible access. I mean, we've never seen the like of it.
Yeah, and we probably won't see it again. Like, there were every documentary about a famous person, you want to see something or hear something that that despite all of their publicity and all of their exposure, you have not heard or seen before, which you do get moments of in the documentary. There were some moments which I was very dismayed to realise that I could literally recite as it was happening, like the first press conference with the snippet of her being asked if she can be the Prime Minister or whatever.
Yeah.
Her talking about Shackleton, like there are certain parts that I go, oh, I know exactly what she's going to say now, and and I know exactly what this statement is, and I know exactly what she said in this interview.
Yeah.
And so obviously 99.99% of people do not know that, so that helps. But any little bit that was beyond that was like little treats. And I think there were just enough of those to keep me interested, despite knowing what was going to happen a lot of the time.
Right.
But yeah, and they did mostly come from Clark's annoying getting in her face footage when she's at home.
And I have to say to give Clark Gayford credit, he is the butt of quite a few jokes, and he is, he's not. There's parts of his being aware of the making of the taking of these images of the course is something that you kind of in part go, gee, but there are multiple occasions where he is, basically ratted out by Jacinda on camera. And I imagine he could have said, I don't want that in there, and he didn't. So that's to his credit. They also said afterwards that there is a rather lengthy available, probably unavailable supercut of Jacinda telling him to stop filming, please, which, maybe that's for a midnight screening at some point in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it does, everyone, I know a lot of people like to say, oh, how come Clark gets all this attention, just because he's a man looking after a kid while his partner is the Prime Minister, and what about all the women who just looked after all the families while they're husbands? But I guess this is still a very unique situation in that those women did not have to be in the 9th floor office while their partner was doing their job.
Breastfeeding.
And so that you go, actually, well, there's no way for him to not be in this story, including when he is, which I definitely related to, when there's a lot of stress happening and he's going, who wants a cup of tea?
Yeah.
Do you want a cup of tea, Jacinda? Do you want a cup of tea, Grant? And Grant's going, oh, yeah, I guess I'll take a cup of tea. And then Jacinda's just like, stop talking, Clark. And you go, oh, yeah. That's right. You are the one person in this room who is not really supposed to be there. How do you act? I guess maybe there is nothing else to do but just try and have a job, which is filming the Prime Minister constantly, because, otherwise you're just a civilian in these spaces who knows.
One of the other things that reminds me of when you say that is that, I mean, what a time it was. They touch on this only very briefly in the film. They don't linger on it. But Clark Gayford was subjected to some of the most appalling disinformation. Even before all the COVID stuff happened, the elaborate lies and false gossip that was disseminated, almost engineered quite deliberately against him, that involved all sorts of appalling things of which not a skerrick was true, that reached the point where he authorised a police statement denying this complete nonsense that was everywhere. It was a time with all the Kermit the Frogs on Twitter and all that sort of stuff. And I remember one of our colleagues had a metric by which he would measure whether or not this had reached. And I think was it the Remuera New World?
Yes,
that these rumours of all of half of Auckland being shut off to take that is the kind of shit. It's like to a certain point you can insulate yourself from that, but that, as well as all of the appalling stuff that Jacinda Ardern was subject to, it's a lot. And so I think that's one of the reasons why this isn't just some kind of heartfelt view within a particular family and politics. And Neve is a huge part of this too, we should say. But it is a particularly vicious series of campaigns of hatred that they had to endure during that period of time.
Yeah, it was interesting that they didn't go into it more, actually, because it is, by its nature, a personal documentary.
Yes.
There was a little, pre-recorded, I guess, speech from Jacinda Ardern before it aired, basically saying, thanks for watching, and, this is a documentary about all of New Zealand, which is a very Jacinda Ardern thing to say.
It is a very Jacinda Ardern thing to say, yeah.
But it is, it does cover events that every person in New Zealand from 2018 to 2023 will be familiar with. So there is that kind of, like, it's not like you're just watching a person's, home life. But the personal element of it, I almost wish and she doesn't really get into it in the book either, and I think it is that almost slight refusal to acknowledge it, in terms of don't acknowledge it, don't feed it, don't whatever.
Right.
But I would have expected, just, as a person who's watched plenty of documentaries and made some documentaries, that there would be some visual indication of what that was like, whether it was, an assistant having to delete emails, or somebody talking to somebody about extra security, or just something that kind of, because they reference it and they talk about protesters, and obviously they have footage from the Parliament protests in 2022, but there isn't that sense of, outside of all of that, which everyone saw, what was there, which I'm sure was immense. But there's not really
I think that's
any of that.
such an interesting point. It goes to the heart of something that's fascinating around Jacinda Ardern's departure from office as well. Part of it is because of the proximity of this story, and that's underscored by the people that were outside the Civic on Saturday night, who, it's worth saying, were exercising a democratic right to protest and did
Very
not
peaceful.
stop anyone entering the cinema, and so, no argument with that. It's still close. It's still ongoing. And my sense is that one of Jacinda Ardern's priorities, particularly in her departure, was not to say, I'm leaving because it became untenable for me to deal with this ghastly stuff. And I don't think it was. I don't think that was it. I think it was probably a bigger part than she said. And I think that she felt I would as I see it, that was something that she felt, for reasons that are entirely be laudable and virtuous, that she didn't want to send a message, that that's what being in politics means, and B, that there was any kind of, to offer any sense of victory to the sorts of people which we do see on the lawns of Parliament, who did have nooses, who did want to send to Nuremberg politicians and media,
Yeah, it's that kind of, you don't want to give any indication that if you annoy or harass someone enough, then even the leader of the country will get out of your way, kind of thing.
Right.
Which is obviously very kind of perpetually at odds with the general Jacinda Ardern kind of thesis, which is, when I heard imposter syndrome mentioned almost immediately in the movie, there's a lot of imposter syndrome in the book. And, on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, it's good to know, it's a good thing to know that even people who seem very in control and have a lot of power still have those feelings of doubt. On the other hand, it feels a little bit like when really conventionally attractive people say that sometimes they feel ugly, and you're like, great. Well, in terms of reality, this is quite a different situation to the people that you're speaking to. And so there is that, like, wanting to be able to relate and be relatable to a regular New Zealander or a regular person. Versus basically needing to acknowledge I am also in a position that is most people in the entire world will never experience something like this.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, in that sense, I don't know, I would have expected her to err on the side of this is what it's like for a normal person to be on the end of this sort of abuse, essentially. But instead it kind of went the other way to, well, you're the Prime Minister and this is just kind of politics and let's not talk about it, and by the way, I've resigned.
I went into the film, if I'm totally honest with you, having covered large parts of the story from a journalistic standpoint. I haven't written a book, as you have, but I've certainly felt that I understood the material pretty well, knew the lyrics to some of the songs. And I got to say, I wasn't bored for a second. I found it really compelling. I think as a piece of filmmaking, it's terrific. And I actually regretted not bringing my 12-year-old daughter along, who I think would have. So from a as far as the film was concerned, that one of the things that was new to me was those tapes from the Alexander Turnbull product. Which, by the way, if you have listened to Juggernaut season 1, those David Longy tapes that we used were the kind of precursor to that project. But also in terms of the different bits that you see, there's the behind-the-scenes stuff, but especially around the days before her exit, I sort of felt as though I understand that in ways that I hadn't so much before. In terms of what's missing, I'm interested if there are particular things you thought were missing from the film before we jump onto the book. For me, one of the parts, again, notwithstanding the challenges one faces, of course, in terms of A, you've only got so long, you can't do it all, and B, you're trying to appeal to a global audience. There was some coverage of that dramatic moment of the Winston Peters decision-making, so we got that. We understood. I think they really quite efficiently gave a sense of how a system works, remembering that most of the people who watch this, whether it's in America or the UK, don't have proportional systems, so it's a novelty for them. And so we got that sense, and we got the sense of but what we didn't get was any of 2020, and which I think is a big enough part of the story that it warrants some reflection, and perhaps you can tell me also whether this is much of that in the book, on a term in which there was an unprecedented majority government under the MMP system, when you had a government coming in 2017 with all these high, lofty ambitions, and then hit by these series of unimaginable crises. But then in 2020, you got an absolute majority. You can do stuff. The stuff didn't really get done that they had set out to do. That wasn't, I don't think, sufficiently dealt with.
No, and the fact that I don't have an immediate recollection of it from the book suggests it wasn't really addressed. I definitely remember it being covered that basically taking capital gains tax off the table before the 2020 election, and that was basically, it sounded like New Zealand First were going to kick up a fuss or something. There was a very clear, like, this person is not going to allow this to happen, therefore I am doing this, even though I don't want to. So that was covered. But no, there wasn't that kind of, well, now there's nobody stopping us, so what are we doing? It almost remained just exhausting throughout 2020. There was it's almost like because of, I don't know, the 2021 Delta and all of that, it's almost like that was just not even front of mind, that they could do not whatever they wanted, but they could do a lot more than any previous government could have. So yeah, it's not really covered, and they do mention in the film some of those almost overdue changes that happened, which again are those ones we go, well, you're not going to say no to decriminalising abortion, and you're not going to say no to these other things, but they were hardly controversial decisions to make at the time.
I thought of an international audience watching that. They have a clip of Jacinda Ardern saying, and in the year 2019 or whatever, abortion should not be a crime. And all these people going, oh, abortion was a crime. All these people being arrested around.
Wait a minute.
It's not quite that simple.
And I think there were people in the audience at the Civic going, it was a crime. It was a crime before that.
It was in the Crimes Act. It was in the Crimes Act. Yeah.
But stuff like that, where again, it's the classic sort of Ardern tale of things that people in New Zealand go, that's not as big a thing, but either because we've already kind of progressed past that, maybe not in the Crimes Act, but just in reality, but certainly to many international audiences where abortion is very much still a criminal offence in their country, like that is a big deal. So it's that constant battle between the global and the domestic. And I was very interested that the only mention of global media that they had was a little bit disparaging. When
was that when she declined to do an op-ed?
Yeah,
for
when
Time?
She goes, why would the Times want us to write something about our COVID?
Time magazine, I think it was.
Oh, Time magazine. Want us to write something about our COVID response, and and then the press sec saying, I would suggest you decline, and it does give a sense of staying very local, which was not the perception of certainly local media at the time.
No, it might have been by then, though. That might have been part of what prompted Andrew Campbell to say, I suggest we decline. I mean, having slightly straddled those two worlds of local and global media at the time, there was unquestionably a sense within the local press gallery that there was more attention being turned to the international media than the local media. I think I have some sympathy with that. On the other hand, I do think there was a huge demand at that time too. But certainly it's something, we've seen with prime ministers, of which Ardern is not alone, that sometimes being overseas is a really nice place to be. It's like things are simpler. People don't, get into the weeds as much.
But that's, I think, part of the people's continued kind of annoyance or frustration is that for most prime ministers, they're the prime minister, and then that's kind of the biggest political thing they do, unsurprisingly. And then, maybe they go sit on some boards, or you see them pop up with a comment about some policy however many years later.
Get a helicopter.
But they certainly don't go and become more recognisable and as almost more famous around the world. Like, I think that is quite...
Helen Clark nearly did. She'd become...
Yes, I watched her documentary at the film festival as well many years ago.
Okay, yeah.
Not the ending anyone was wanting.
I tell you what, I can't wait to see the Christopher Luxon one with all that footage that Amanda Luxon's been getting. Like, she's getting a lot of footage. A lot of footage.
All of his TikToks stitched together. But yeah, and I think that is part of the kind of New Zealanders haven't had to deal with a prime minister who was famous now because she was prime minister, but also outside of her New Zealand political role.
Yeah.
Like people, and when the documentary opens on her going to speak to students at Harvard, and then her speaking at a women's empowerment conference in California, and part of me goes, well, this kind of has nothing to do with her being prime minister. This, the documentary is called Prime Minister. You would think it's about her term, but it is actually about her term and then what she is doing now, which obviously is actually quite different to her role as prime minister.
Anything else in the book? I mean, did the book? I've only read parts of the book, but does the book feel like a companion piece to the film? There are parts in the film where she is. I mean, her listening to those contemporaneous oral history interviews that I mentioned, she is in the process of writing her book.
Yeah, and
when she's listening to those,
and you
right?
can
She
tell,
drew
and you
on
can
them.
tell when you read the book.
You can tell. I mean,
Yeah.
does it feel like a companion book to the film? How close are they in terms of tone, content?
They're very close. I think I would almost say, which feels like the easy way out, but I would say just watch the film. There are some moments in the film that I then, having already read the book, go, oh, she was reminded of that. She must have been reminded of that moment during the process of this film being cut together, and therefore it's in the book. Like wanting to punch Simon Bridges in the face. That is a whole thing in the book, which is a little moment that was captured. And part of me goes, kind of a random incident to remember, but certainly when you've literally said it out loud to someone and now there's footage of it, like much easier to then write down. And there were some things that were said in the Turnbull Library, which maybe she just remembered saying them originally, but some of the bits that in the movie, those exact sentiments kind of are relayed in the book. So I would guess that the process of the film being cut together was also helpful research for her in remembering things for the book, which does mean that there is a lot of...
And Clark having 3 different camera angles on every single...
and having the tripod set up in every room.
Quite useful too.
Yeah, so then it does feel that there's quite a lot of overlap, and then what the film offers is somebody else observing rather than all of it coming through her very sort of, as always, carefully articulated point of view that, I would say you get that point of view from the documentary, plus you get to see her when she's not talking, but you can observe an emotion or a reaction that obviously would not be described in the book.
And we'll wrap it up with, I suppose, probably the really big part of it is she swears once in the film.
She does swear once. I wish there was more. That's what I wish there was. I had hoped that, Clark turning their house into Big Brother would result in some, like, there's very human moments. There's very, obviously she talks very candidly. There is something very strange about seeing a Prime Minister in pajamas. I don't know. It's just, there's that kind of element of like, obviously you've never seen Jacinda Ardern wearing her nightie, basically.
Propping her cup of tea on a pregnant belly. I mean, that's
like very wholesome stuff. I kind of, which maybe there wasn't, I was like, she never, like, I don't know, danced or like, just like...
She talks about dancing when the first... When they got the news that they were on 0 COVID cases,
so
where's the dance?
There's a bit of her, sort of hanging out with Neve and playing with Neve and trying to work while rocking Neve's.
Neve's got to be said. It's fantastic.
Yeah, Neve is a star.
Almost as impressive as Ernest Shackleton. I mean, not quite that level, but up there.
But it was, I was kind of surprised at how not on, like it didn't feel orchestrated or anything, but it was, and maybe that's the point. I go, God, you go to work, you do all this work, and then you go home, and then you talk to your fiance about doing all this work, and then you go to bed, and that's kind of it. Like I had almost hoped for her sake that there would just be some random weird thing, that they do at home. That's like, I don't know, a little. Stop looking at me like that. There would just be, that there would be, even the way that the house is decorated. I was like, oh, you didn't even sort of select your own furniture. She talked about going to Kmart to get her furniture. I was like, you're the Prime Minister. You can, it was just everything was kind of secondary.
It's like, but in a way, I think that might just be Jacinda Ardern. There is one of the refrains you would get from a certain number, far from all, in the press gallery who were accustomed to prime ministers at a certain point ripping off the mask and then tearing down Courtney Place and getting on the beers and just being like, cursing like a sailor and telling them the real, giving them the real skinny on everything. And there's like, why doesn't she do this? Because maybe that's just what she.
I think I spent the whole time while I was writing the book, the whole time reading that book, reading everything else that's been written about her, watching this movie. There is still a part of me that goes, she's gonna rip off the mask and reveal.
To sound like one of those Facebook
reveal. But I keep going. There's got to be an outlet, basically, which I mentioned in my review of the book. Is there are hints of anger and things like that, and in the movie she does swear, and that's kind of the closest in anger. She does swear at something, and it comes through. You go, yeah, this seems extremely frustrating, but still never lets the full kind of anger or frustration or whatever it is come through that I thought would come through in the book and didn't really. And then in the movie there's just that little snippet, and that's the part where I'm like, if you want to be truly relatable, you'll just talk about being pissed off a little bit more, I think.
I agree with you, but also probably to wrap this up, I think swearing like that brings the office into disrepute and probably the country.
You're going to lay a complaint.
Pours shame upon our country. It's unacceptable.
I would commission you to write that for spinoff.co.nz.
It's been a lot of fun to chat with you, Mad. Thanks for that. The film's out, the book's out. Mad's book's out there too.
Somewhere in the op shop, probably.
Kia ora koutou.